All right, welcome to reading number 3 for Black, White, and Red All Over. We're going to be finishing up chapter 2 and having discussion. And for a few minutes, I'm going to be working to get my friends on Hive in. And so we'll be starting actually in just a few minutes. Crazy weather we have been having across the country in San Francisco. And also, it has really been something to look at the amount of lightning there has been. Not last night, I only heard a little bit of thunder, but for those of you who are in the local area, it's really a shocking thing. Of course, now my friends that live in the Midwest and in the South are like, that was hardly even just a little, that was no noise at all. We deal with that all summer, but that was quite an experience. Beautiful blue lightning, of course, now fires and such, not necessarily something that can be enjoyed by everyone because you look at all kinds of fires and things of that nature that have to be put out. And because of what's going on with coronavirus and the fact that isolation has to be maintained, essential service workers are stressed in ways that we have not seen before. So it is not always the simplest thing to do. Even it's never easy to control something like fire, but it's one of those things that is even more complex because of the nature of things that we're dealing with at this moment in time. So it has been a very interesting 2 days because of this. All right, I'm going to send this link over to the folks on Hive and we'll be starting in just a moment. Okay. I hope everybody's doing well, and I want to thank you. Amy, I did read your comment. I know that you did come back and watch it later. Demetra, I saw your comment. I know you had to study for a test, and I recognize that people have lives. You don't stop everything you're doing just because I'm here doing this. But the beautiful thing about Facebook and social media is that if things are used correctly, we will have a record of positive things that we have done that we will have to share with one another for years and decades because apparently what happens on social media never goes away. So with what happening on social media not going away, we can have these things here indefinitely. So if you miss it, don't feel any type of way about that. I'm perfectly happy with you catching up, and as I learned to say from the Sir Walter Jones show, you're always welcome to be kind and rewind. All right, we're going to start out in just another few minutes. I just got to drop this link. I'm having to use both my phone and I'm having to use both my phone and my computer to do this. And so it takes a little bit longer than it would, but I have promised folks that I drop a link and I must of course do that. One more minute. Just give me another minute, y'all. All right, link dropped, and that will allow my audience on Hive to be able to come and join us in just a few minutes. All right, let's get off into this. I want to mention again something I failed to mention at the beginning of yesterday's show, which is thank you again to Neil M. Jackson and APS International for the support they're giving me tomorrow, and I'll be dropping links to that on all the Facebook posts. Miss Jackson will be doing a review of this book, so I'm not reading a lot of it, and so I'm not doing spoilers for that. And of course, we'll see what she has to say. She hasn't told me except that she thought it was riveting. Miss Jackson and APS International run a very professional shop. If your book is good, they'll say that. If there's things you need to work on, you about to find out. But of course, being a professional, if there's any improvements that are necessary, she also will let you know ahead of time. So if you are an independent author who's looking to move forward in your career, I can highly recommend APS International, and thank you for the support. All right, let's get off into this. This is a large print copy of the first edition of Black, White, and Red All Over. And I'm reading from here. The cover that you will see starting Tuesday actually has bullet holes instead of blood spots. This will also be on free giveaway on the 18th. I'll be dropping those links live as part of Miss Jackson's review, and I also will be putting those links on each of these Facebook sessions, so they will be there for you to find. All right, we left off in chapter 2. And let me recap. We didn't get through all of chapter 2. It's kind of long. But to this point in the story, here are some of the things that we've dealt with. This is set in a fictional county in Southern Virginia, which is one of the most conservative areas of the state. Now, Virginia is the well-known home of the Confederacy 160 or so years ago. So I figured it was a good place to start a story about the kind of issues that go into black, white, red all over. A resurgence of racial tension and violence, and how it's a good, clean, good, green, good, clean, gritty Christian mystery, and how Christians of all colors sometimes choose alternative ways of relating. And also, as a black woman, I look at instead of having another story where black people respond to something awful that was done to them, let's start the story with black people doing something positive for themselves and let other people react. And in this case, you have people reacting who usually are placed as the heroes. Police detectives and officers in this county are now in the position of having to find a legal reaction to something they don't like. The newspaper did not just come and read a very provocative editorial about how it's going to operate. The newspaper is also doing something that you and your community can do, which is put forward a Freedom of Information Act request to request public records. What this new black newspaper is demanding are public records on all arrests made by these police officers and offices in Lofton County, Virginia for the last 10 years. And so, after this happens, Captain Ironwood Hamilton, our main character for the story, not only has 72% of the town talking about these black people cannot be allowed to speak freely to us in this manner, and why aren't you going to go do something as our police captain, he then starts to get calls from his fellow officers about the paper and its demands, and decides to take them all to dinner so they can all sit down and discuss their responses. During this dinner, Captain Hamilton and his lieutenant, Patrick O'Reilly, basically listen as the other police officers discuss what has happened. And the police officers begin to split into two camps based on actual legal facts. Old man Captain Angler from down in Smallwood has 68. He lived through the civil rights period. And he brings up some legitimate points. First of all, in truth, a Freedom of Information Act request has to be answered except in 9 specific cases. The only way a police department cannot answer this request is if the information involves active cases. So the way the Lofton County Free Voice, the black newspaper, got around that was they asked for cases going back 10 years. So that while story starts in 2019. So if there are active cases in 2019, maybe that information can be turned over. But everything from 2018 backwards can. So he says there's only 9 ways we can refuse this request, and we're not eligible to take any of them. So with that being the case, what we're going to need to do is comply. Take all the information and throw it at the newspaper. Everybody just get 10 years of police information out and just give it to them. Because by the time they sort through there, another news story will come up and they'll move on. If we try to do it the other way, they'll drag this out for years. Captain Angler represents, and he talks about things that police officers are legitimately concerned about. If we let this drag out, all police officers, even those not involved in police brutality across the state, will get tarred with a brush they didn't have anything to do with, because most police officers are not beating down black people. That's Captain Angler's position. Captain Bragg over in Littleburg is like, we don't have to do anything for these people. Barack Obama's not in office. They ain't got no power. Captain Bragg is of the mindset that the whole idea of black people having rights to know what is being done to them is antiquated. It's been settled for 160 years. However, at the end of what we read yesterday, someone comes through to remind him that no, Virginia did not win the Civil War. And this person is a relative of the man who signed the surrender document. We were just introduced to Captain Henry Fitzhugh Lee, who happens to be a great nephew a couple times removed of a certain actual historical figure named Robert E. Lee, Confederate general who signed the surrender papers to end the Civil War. The Confederacy lost. Captain Bragg gets very angry about this reminder, and I will read it again. So the question we have to look at now is the police officers have sort of divided themselves. Notice that none of them has said anything about how the records that they have. There's 2 things happening. One, you have a legal response that Captain Angler has laid out, and the potential of illegal response if they choose not to do that. And these are police officers. But notice that no one yet has talked about the impact of these crimes on the black community. So now Captain Lee from Big Loft has made the scene, and we still haven't heard from Captain Hamilton and Lieutenant O'Reilly. But now let's see what Captain Lee brings to the table. Will he, like his uncle, knowing better, decide to side with the demeaning of black people and the crushing of their rights, or will he make a different decision? A lot of the rest of this book is about here are the choices before you. Where do you stand? And if you are what you say you are, a Christian, I don't tell you exactly what to do, but you'll see if you believe what you say you believe, where do you end up? So let's see where Captain Lee starts out. And then for those of you that pick up the book or in the free giveaway period, or if you want to jump the line and buy it today, you can. It's on Amazon. You'll find out where all these people work their way out. But for today, let's see if Captain Lee is going to throw in his hand with Captain Bragg or Captain Angler's perspective. Or maybe he will chart a different path entirely. I'm going to go back a little bit from where we read yesterday. Lieutenant Hill has suggested that if they don't comply, the scandal will go on for years if they draw it out. So Lieutenant Hill has sided with Captain Angler. Captain Bragg does not like this. Come on! I can't believe you all are talking like this, Captain Bragg cried. This state has gone through a lot in the last 158 years not to have to go through this with these people. A deep sigh from the only officer quieter than Captain Hamilton at the table, his dark eyes emanating the sorrow that framed his grim face as thickly as his salt and pepper black hair. And suddenly, Lieutenant O'Reilly realized why his face was so familiar in Virginia. Now, don't you start, Lee, Captain Bragg snapped. Just because my great-great-grandfather messed up a few times, and because your great-great-great-uncle had to sign the whole thing off in 1865, doesn't mean I need a history lesson from you. I already know what happened. Captain Henry Fitzhugh Lee of Big Loft's police force leaned forward in his chair and gave Captain Bragg a glare so cold that one would have thought it was around February of 1865. Like his cousin Captain Hamilton, Captain Lee was new in Big Loft's police force, and like Captain Hamilton, he knew he had a mess on his hands, very little time to solve it, and no patience for bombast from anyone. His tone was quiet, but as withering as a freezing cold day. Captain Bragg, he said, we've known each other since childhood. So you ought to know by now that I wouldn't even waste my time on you at a time like this. What I was about to say is that we in Big Loft have a Freedom of Information Act office that has determined what you have found out, Captain Angler. The decision is up to the police commissioner and comes down to whether it is determined that some cases need to be reopened. About how many cases would it take to stop a Freedom of Information Act request like this? Said Captain Johnston. Captain Lee sighed again. That's not even the right question, but look here, Lee. We know your family fell from Olympus, but still, stop that, Captain Lee snapped. There is no time for that foolishness. Captain Lee's orders were instantly obeyed. Silence resumed at table. Have any of y'all yet been through the files these people are asking for? I have, Captain Hamilton said. Silence around the rest of the table. Fine, Captain Lee said. The rest of you haven't been through them because you lived what is there, or you just don't remember and you just don't care. But you're asking questions like we just need to find some simple trick or loophole out of this mess. There is none. Y'all just want to know if somehow there is a magic number of cases we have to half-heartedly reopen in order to stall this request. There isn't. Are you sure? Lieutenant Wells said. Captain Lee sighed again. Suppose we were to try to find that proverbial back door. Southern white men in Virginia, heirs of the founders, desperately reduced to try to slink through a back door. Pick a number, any number. What do you think, gentlemen? That FOIA encompasses all 80 miles of Lofton County, the sheriff's office, the 5 towns, and Big Loft for the last 10 years. How many cases do you think we would have to reopen to stop a Freedom of Information Act request that big? After a few moments, Lieutenant Pemberton sighed. I get it. Pretty darn near all of them. What would your ideal number be, Pemberton? You've got half the problem solved, so let's keep going. 200 cases countywide. That's a nice conservative estimation, Captain Lee said. Anyone else? 1/10 of that, Captain Bragg spat. This defeatism makes me sick. The veins in Captain Lee's neck began to stand out. He was very, very angry, but maintained the cold tone in his voice. Be patient, Captain Bragg. In a few moments, you'll learn the difference between defeatism and defeat. Anyone else? Captain Angler had caught the wind of where this was going. His face collapsed in a colossal frown. 500 cases, 50 for each year, he said. With age and experience, at last we began to hear a little common sense, Captain Lee said. Assume that was the number. That would lead to scandal enough. I tell you, you make me sick, Lee, Captain Bragg spat. Not as sick as I'm about to make you, Captain Lee retorted. If the numbers hold in your office and the rest of your offices like they hold in mine, every case involving an African American in Lofton County in the last 10 years need to be re-examined, and as many as 80% of the convictions may need to be overturned, and the world is about to know it. Forks were dropped. Beverages were knocked over. Pound cake was choked on, and Heimlich maneuvers had to be applied, spreading cake crumbs and half-chewed cake across the table. Well, I just about lost my appetite anyway, Captain Angler said. Anger gave way to sorrow again in Captain Lee's face. You are blessed, Captain Angler. You can retire out of this mess. I'd start drawing down that 401k as fast as I could, starting Monday. The rest of us, 20 years or more from retirement age. You're blessed, Lieutenant O'Reilly, to be very young and fresh and green. You can still go do something else easily. And Captain Hamilton, you're blessed because you are new, and at least made the right first steps before that Freedom of Information Act request came. If you don't survive in Tinyville, the Army will gladly have you back, full time. Me, I already know I'm going back to the Army, or I will retire with 23 years of service. The rest of you, plus 40 and with 10 years or more creating what is in those files. Captain Lee was kind enough not to say the rest. Captain Bragg thus flared up again. Well, I don't regret any of it. These people have to be kept under control, or you see what they do. This is your fault anyway, Captain Hamilton. Oh, Captain Hamilton said with a disarming smile. What did I do? You handled that whole mess up at the high school with those black kids without the firmness necessary, and gave these people an opening to think they could get away with this kind of stuff. The Freedom of Information Act request is dated 2 weeks before that happened, Captain Hamilton said evenly. Captain Bragg sputtered and coughed. Lieutenant O'Reilly desperately hoped his attempt to stifle his laughter was not visible to the rest. However, Captain Lee saw it. His dark eyes lightened up just a little. Besides that, Captain Bragg, Captain Hamilton continued, no crime had been committed. Once you have done real violence, if you have a functioning conscience at all. You seek not to do it again unless it is absolutely necessary. I know that not everyone, owing to a lack of experience or a lack of conscience, can understand that, but Captain Bragg turned the color of a tomato, while the grim features of Captain Lee brightened all the way up. It is what it is, Captain Bragg, Captain Hamilton finished, and then picked up his glass of tonic water and drank the last of it. Captain Bragg had nothing else to say for the moment, and neither did Captain Lee, but the latter seemed much more satisfied than the former. Well, said Lieutenant Hill, it looks like we have two options. The Angler option. Respond to the Freedom of Information Act request with excruciating detail and hope some other news comes along to drown it out. Or the Bragg option. Make them fight it out in the courts and hope for the best. Deputy Alexander, what do you think Sheriff Nottingham's position is going to be? We're in the same position as Captain Lee and Bigloft, Deputy Alexander said. Our legal people are saying we either reopen the cases and get a legitimate reason to stop that request, or we have to comply with it. The problem for you that want to hold out is going to be that if County and Bigloft go, and Smallwood goes as well, there's no chance in that much data that they're not going to find something. The pressure on the rest of you will become immense, as will the pressure on the courts to force the rest out. Which is why we all have to hold out, Captain Bragg said through his clenched teeth. But Captain Bragg, Deputy Alexander said, you're not listening. It's not in my hands. It's not in Captain Lee's hands either. We don't get to make those decisions. Well, who do I need to speak to? Captain Bragg said. I was listening. If we don't take our chances, we don't have a chance. Call the office Monday and I'll put you through to Sheriff Nottingham, said Deputy Alexander. Captain Lee drew out his pen and wrote on a clean napkin. Here is the number of the police commissioner's office in Bigloft, Commissioner Orton Thomas. I'm surprised I didn't have to shame it out of you, Lee. I was sparing you the trouble of coming into the 21st century with your ideas and having to use Google. Captain Hamilton intervened by saying something, but poor Lieutenant O'Reilly coughed and sneezed and wheezed so hard in trying not to laugh that he didn't hear it. And on that note, Captain Hamilton said after he thumped his lieutenant on the back like it was really necessary, let's adjourn. I think I know where we are. I think we know where we are now. We don't know where you are, Lieutenant Hill said. That's because I don't know yet, Captain Hamilton said. I will let all of you know when I have made my decision. No sooner were they outside and a little way for the rest did Lieutenant O'Reilly turn to his commander. Is it really that bad, sir? It is, Lieutenant, the captain said grimly. Notice how most of our colleagues talked about it. No thought as to what they have done in terms of the actual people they have done it to. Just cases, and how do we all escape the consequences that are coming. It is that bad, Lieutenant. What are we going to do? I don't know yet. I know there is another way beyond what Captain Bragg and Captain Angler, I'm sorry, I changed his name. Captain Bragg and Captain Angler are proposing, and I know that unlike Captain Lee and Deputy Alexander, the buck stops on me. I also know who knows what we should do. Who knows? Lieutenant O'Reilly said. Captain Hamilton pointed upward with a smile. He does. Oh, of course. Aren't you glad that you don't have to depend on me and I don't have to depend on me either? Captain Hamilton said with a smile. We'll get home and get into prayer and then into bed, and we know the Lord will show us which way to go. How much time do we have left, sir? Just 8 days, Lieutenant. Just enough time to prepare a data dump if we wanted to do that. But Deputy Alexander is right. It wouldn't work even if we tried it. Captain Angler is not up for that kind of fight. He may retire and leave a lieutenant to do the dump, but he is not going to go through all that. He knows there is no point. Every tree in the woods south of Smallwood, surely knows why there is no point in Captain Angler and his crew fighting." Lieutenant O'Reilly shuddered. "You mean—" "Yes, Lieutenant, strange fruit, and plenty of it. Maybe not in the last 10 years, but once that floodgate of the last 10 years opens up, that will be enough. The stories will all start coming out for the past 50. Captain Angler has been in that office for 50 years. He thinks that because he has forgotten things as we all do over time, that there's enough good policing in the last 10 years so that the Lofton County Free Voice will get bogged down and then distracted away. Captain Bragg will be up the first thing on Monday trying to convince County and the Commissioner in Big Loft that there is no way forward but to fight. If you think Captain Lee was giving him a hard time—" Lieutenant O'Reilly broke out laughing at last. It was like watching a loud toy poodle barking at a pit bull. Two pit bulls when he came after you. "Captain Bragg doesn't know how he is," Captain Hamilton said. "He and his crew have made a career making themselves feel big by bullying people who can't afford to lash back, until now. He still won't get it after tomorrow either. I'm surprised Captain Lee didn't get the message over to him that it ain't about to work. Lieutenant, let me tell you this. If you put a loud toy poodle in a room full of pit bulls, the toy poodle still won't know he's not a pit bull until he finds himself in a pit bull's stomach." Captain Hamilton sighed. Captain Lee was not in the mood for it today. He's normally not quite that growly, but he just wasn't in the mood for it today. He is the one about to get ill over all this, not Captain Bragg. By this time they were at Lieutenant O'Reilly's car. "Be careful on the road, young man. I'll see you after the first shift tomorrow." "Yes, sir. I'll be praying. Please and thank you, Lieutenant." On Saturdays, the Lofton County Police Force ran a split shift, which essentially meant the captain covered the office the first half of the day and Lieutenant O'Reilly covered the second half. Off he drove, and the captain doubled back to the bar instead of going to his truck right away. Captain Lee had not come out onto the parking lot. The Big Loft officer, although he had Saturday off, was not the kind of man who lingered at a bar under normal circumstances, or anywhere, not in his youth, and then really not after West Point Special Forces and the Judge Advocate General Service, known as JAG, in the Army. Like his cousin, he was one of those men who did what he needed to do and then disappeared into his privacy, except he was much more of a loner, not having the robust family life Captain Hamilton had enjoyed over the same 23 years of their service. Captain Lee's blood pressure was also subject to huge spikes, and his cousin had seen his veins swelling up at the table. Although the Big Loft captain took excellent care of his body and took his medications dutifully, there were certain triggers and situations that were beyond preventative reach, and the blood pressure was not the only life-threatening problem. Captain Lee was on the bar side of the bar, at the bar, the bartender making him a drink to order, a triple-strength virgin mojito. That is, a limeade with 3 limes and triple mint in the glass, enough potassium and menthol in that to knock that pressure spike down in a hurry. That and some blackstrap molasses, and it was done. Captain Lee paid the bartender and tipped him well, and then looked at his watch as he began to drink down his virgin mojito. Captain Hamilton knew that the other captain was counting his own heart rate. He could hear what was about to kill him, and was going to listen to it settle all the way down back to safe levels, or at least safe enough for him to go get more advanced medical help. The bartender returned for the empty glass 3 minutes later. "How was it, Captain Lee?" "Life-saving. Thank you very kindly." "If it's that good, I ought to try it." That was Captain Hamilton, who cut his way with a smile through several good-looking women who were looking over Captain Lee with no idea of what was going on as the captain sat down by his cousin. "Coming right up," the bartender said, and went to go get 3 more limes. "You know, Harry," Captain Hamilton said, "that traffic going into Big Loft on a night like this must be terrible. Why don't you come south with me to Tinyville and enjoy the weekend with me and the family?" I wasn't going back to Big Loft anyway, Ham. That's my whole point, Harry. I know what happens when you get like this. I'd be sick about this whole thing too if I could afford to be. But I've got a big bunch of reasons named Hamilton that I can't, and you need to borrow them too. I'm tired, Ham. I'm tired of this name I have and who I look too much like. I'm tired of Virginia. I'm tired of the memories of the things we've had to do in order to serve this country that just never learns. I'm tired of it, Ham. I do not want to be here anymore. And I just don't know how much longer I can take this mess. That's right. And that's why you're coming home with me. Like many members of his family, Captain Lee was subject to deep depression compounded by PTSD, a dangerous problem for a man who needed to take meticulous care of himself. Captain Hamilton understood it and just grabbed hold of his loner cousin when necessary. I've got the chains. Put your car in neutral and I'll tow it, and you can sit up in the truck cab with me. However you want to do it, Ham. 20 minutes later, Captain Hamilton was driving down the road to Tinyville. His cousin at last relaxed enough while listening to Southern gospel on the radio to go on to exhausted sleep. He had slumped over against the window, and every car light illumined the burden he carried in his handsome and all too familiar looking face. The resemblance was not exact, but it was close enough, growing with age as the black hair turned white, and the sorrow of 2 wars and a ruined people likewise settled upon this Lee. Only now, asleep at last, was their last piece in that face. It's easy for him to be tired when he has insomnia half the time, Lord, Captain Hamilton prayed. So I've got 2 things to figure out. I've got to get Harry the help he needs without taking the work from him that he needs to keep going. And I've got to figure out how to honor that Freedom of Information Request Act without blowing the county up. I don't have a clue, Lord, and that's bad for an investigator. I'm just counting on you to get me and Harry safely home and to show me what I need to do next. That's the end of chapter 2. Okay, I don't see anyone in the chat today, so let me just bring out some issues that are here present in this book. So we've met Captain Lee, and I have given him some of the historical issues that go with his family background. 2 wars, PTSD, but also a very firm sense of having the resemblance of his famous uncle, but he's not on that page. So he looks like someone that you think would go for the old conservative. Well, uh, actually, let me say something else. Does anybody know? You can look this up. The term conservatism. I have to break some hearts today. The term conservatism is not that much younger than the term the Confederacy. The Confederacy was founded in 1861 and lost the war. Conservatism comes up in the Old South in 1867. And if you go back and you look at the first documents and the first posters and the first thing said about conservatism, here's what it says. Conservatism was to conserve the right of the white man to govern over everyone else. And the flyer that went with that said, keep the Negro down. Go back and look it up. 1867. So when you hear people tell you that they're conservatives, in the 20th and 21st century, there's a lot of talk about fiscal responsibility. There's a great deal of talk about family and American values. Go back and ask them if they know about the origins of their own movement, because not every conservative is a racist. My family is considered relatively conservative for California, and many African Americans actually are, but we absolutely cannot be conservative in the rights for other people to keep us down, to keep themselves up. No. And this is why many black people are quote unquote in the liberal camp, even though we don't fit well there either. So Captain Lee is in conservative Virginia, in the old style conservative. And I could have picked any state, but I picked Virginia because it is the place where so much of the Eastern theater of the Civil War actually happened, and where in Charlottesville we found out even a statue of Robert E. Lee was enough to start white people killing each other again. So I figured it was a good spot for a story like this. So here we have this character who is burdened to his heart and dealing with depression in the middle of this crisis that's going on. And so Captain Hamilton not only has to extend himself to figure out what are we going to do about this big Freedom of Information Act request, but also now has to extend himself to another person who's involved in it who is dealing with issues beyond that. He's dealing with health challenges, dealing with his depression, and as he said, Captain Lee is also he talking about I wasn't going back to Big Loft anyway, and I don't want to be here anymore. Um, our cousin is really having a depression fit, and it's getting worse because of sitting around with people who are just dedicated to what Captain Lee has repudiated. He wants nothing to do with what his face looks like, but he's stuck in the sense of he can't help his appearance, and he's still living in Virginia. So, but that also tells you something else. Everybody, even in the South, is not on the same page. There are people that want to move on and are deeply frustrated that that it is difficult to move on. However, as I say, this book talks about how do we find ways to move on together, and how do we do this as a Christian. And as Captain Hamilton says at the end of chapter 2, even as a Christian, sometimes it's hard to know. It is very difficult for us as Christians to separate what God requires from what we're culturally used to. The way that we do church, I don't care whether you're black or white in America, has actually very little to do with how church was done in Scripture. If you ever read Acts chapter 2 to the end of the chapter, and you keep reading the letters of Paul and Peter and James and John, so often you find the church that is in thy house. No large church buildings and all the different ways that we do church in these buildings existed in Bible times. That didn't come along until a European imperialist named Constantine, Roman emperor at the time, decided to make Christianity the state religion. And in doing so, he brought back a lot of the features of Jewish temple worship and applied them to Christianity so that he could also put in the features of Roman temple worship. This is how you get a Roman Catholic church, which takes on, quote, saints, but actually is just doing what the Greeks and the Romans did in building a pantheon of gods. Because in the Greek and Roman religion, it's very similar to Mormonism actually. You could become God by means of your own works. If you did heroic works, you were then placed among the gods. Well, the Roman Catholic Church continues this because if you do certain good works as defined by the Roman Catholic Church, you can be beatified and at last made a saint. Never mind that the religion first delivered to the saints says that all Christian people are saints. But that's probably more information than you have ever heard preached in any church, whether Catholic or Protestant. One of the hardest things about COVID-19, and it's going to come up, even though I wrote this last year, it's going to come up, is that separating Christianity from what people in our church are doing, whether you are black or white, can be extremely difficult. Separating cultural practices from what Christ demands can be very difficult. It comes up in this book. It's coming up right now because there are people in the United States who feel like their right to be a Christian is being, I'm in California, so this is a really big issue here. There are ministers whose Bible teaching I respect who are out here quoting Acts 5:29, talking about we ought to obey God rather than man, but they're confused. God does not demand that you worship him in a church building because he said in John 4:24, when the Samaritan woman asked him, should we worship in Jerusalem in the temple there, or on Mount Gerizim, the temple there? Where should we worship God? And Jesus said, the day is coming when you're not going to either of those two buildings, because God is interested in those worshiping him in spirit and in truth. And so for 300 years, the first 300 years of Christianity, Christians were worshiping daily from house to house and witnessing as they were in the marketplaces and doing their work. And this is actually church out of every tribe and nation. This is what was going on. But people think that if their way of having church and their way of ordering their culture is being affected, then they're being attacked. And then they have the right to defy those who are attacking and you can hear this all the time, their way of life, as if their way of life is actually what God gave us to do. It is not. I belong to a black church. I recognized at 34 years old that, no, it wasn't quite 34. That's the number I came up with at the end. I was about 38. But I realized that 90% of what is done, even in a very good black church, is additional to the faith delivered to the saints. That is, 90% of it could disappear and we would still be having good church. Well, that was a couple years ago. Today, 90% of it has disappeared, but we're still hearing the Bible read, the word is being preached, we're by a conference call, and we're on, we have preaching, we have singing, we have all the things the scripture says the Christians are supposed to do. But 90% of it disappeared because of COVID-19. And we're still growing as a church and as a people, even while separated from each other. But people find this hard to accept. These police officers grew up in a society where it was considered the thing that you do to have a black person always available for you to go beat down if you felt like it. And is this true in the United States? It happens so often that we have to say, yes, it is. That there's always going to be a class of people, and that somehow, and if you go do your history on this, you look at how Europeans have justified taking over the world, they believe they have the divine right to do so. Go back far enough in history and read this, and you'll find it out that this is said by so-called Christian people. Our black heroes in this book are challenging this. They're challenging these men's rights to do whatever they want to do and always have people under them. They're challenging the idea that power goes one way. And these men who we are reading, we will find out are churchmen. And they believe that their right to white supremacy goes well with their church life and their kit and caboodle. And the reason that Captain Lee is ill is that he already knows what his uncle had to find out the hard way. You try to match those two things, you cruising for a bruising sooner or later. And he knows what the outcome was for his own. Captain Lee knows for his own family what the outcome was, and that there's going to be major trouble down the road, and that people still have not learned the lesson, and they're going to head over the cliff again. That's his fear. However, we're going to have to wait to find out what actually happens in this book, because we have reached the end of chapter 2. Tomorrow, Mr. Neil Jackson of APS International is going to be doing a review of this book tomorrow at 3 o'clock Central Time, so 1 o'clock Pacific Time. I will be posting up the link to that on this Facebook and also on the previous 2 readings. If you are watching on YouTube and Hiveland, I will be posting up that comment on the 2 previous YouTube videos and also on the 2 Hive posts that go with this. So this Hive post will actually go up. I've been putting them up the next day. I'm going to work to try to get this up by 9 o'clock tonight so that the link is actually there to the review early in the day tomorrow when it comes on. because it might be too tight otherwise. I want to thank everyone who has come and listened and who will. I know it's the middle of the day on a Monday. We all have things to do. I had to run and get some chores finished before I came here today myself, so of course I understand. You are always welcome to Be Kind and Rewind. I'm going to present the same lively. I was told by a friend that I'm flamboyant. I prefer lively. I'm going to present the same lively presentation, no matter what the numbers are. And everyone is welcome to come and see it later or, come at the time the live comes on. I would love to hear from people. Is there a better time of day for a number of you? You can leave that in the comments for me. Maybe this time of day is too early for the future because there are more things coming along, but I'm not going to say anything about that at this moment because the focus right now is on this book. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to say it again. We'll get the glare off the book here. The free download will be available starting tomorrow for this, and if you want a paperback, it will be discounted. And if you want signed author copies, let me know. It's going to take a little bit longer because of the postal service's difficulties and COVID-19, but I will work to get some signed author copies and let you pay me for those by PayPal. All right. Everyone, please have a lovely day. Be kind to one another out there. And I will see you all. I'll be posting the link to Miss Jackson's review, and I will be in the comments in the chat on that live as well. Have a gorgeous day. Be safe out there. Bye.